The Black Cauldron. The Black Cauldron from 1985. This dark fantasy was Disney's most expensive animated film at the time, with a budget of $44 million, and it became their biggest box office disaster of the decade. The film earned only $21 million domestically, losing the studio roughly $12 million when accounting for marketing and distribution costs. Production was plagued with problems from the start. Director Jeffrey Katzenberg, newly hired at Disney, ordered 12 minutes cut from the nearly completed film because he found it too frightening for children. Animators worked on the project for 5 years, only to see their work brutally edited just months before release. The film earned a PG rating, the first for a Disney animated feature, because the original cut was deemed too intense. Critics found The Black Cauldron tonally confused, too dark for children, but too simplistic for adults. The Horned King, meant to be terrifying, was so frightening that children left theaters crying. The film's failure nearly ended Disney's animation department entirely. Studio executives seriously considered shutting down feature animation and focusing solely on live-action films. Only the surprise success of The Great Mouse Detective the following year saved the department. The Black Cauldron remained Disney's biggest animated flop until Treasure Planet 17 years later, Home on the Range. Home on the Range, released in 2004. This animated western about 3 dairy cows trying to save their farm had a production budget of $110 million. It earned only $104 million worldwide, making it a significant financial loss after marketing costs. Disney marketed the film as a return to traditional hand-drawn animation, but audiences stayed away in massive numbers. The film opened in 4th place domestically, losing to The Passion of the Christ in its 6th week of release. Critics savaged Home on the Range for its generic story, forgettable songs, and outdated humor. Roger Ebert gave it 2 stars, calling it a throwback to more innocent times, which is another way of saying it's not very interesting. The film's failure accelerated Disney's shift toward computer animation. Following its disappointing performance, Disney announced the closure of their Florida animation studio and laid off most of their hand-drawn animation staff. Home on the Range became symbolic of Disney's creative slump in the early 2000s, a period when Pixar dominated animation, while Disney struggled to recapture their Renaissance-era magic. The film currently holds a 53% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and is largely forgotten even by Disney fans. Treasure Planet from 2002. Directors Ron Clements and John Musker spent over a decade trying to make this space-set reimagining of Treasure Island their passion project. Following successes like The Little Mermaid and Aladdin, Disney gave them a budget of $140 million, making it one of the most expensive animated films ever produced at that time. The film bombed catastrophically, earning only $109 million worldwide. When accounting for marketing costs estimated at $50 million, Treasure Planet lost Disney approximately $74 million. The film holds the distinction of being one of the biggest box office bombs in cinema history relative to its budget. Critics praised the animation, particularly the innovative blend of traditional and computer-generated imagery, but found the story emotionally hollow. Audiences never connected with Jim Hawkins or the film's sci-fi aesthetic. The Thanksgiving 2002 release date placed it against Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and The Santa Claus 2, both massive hits that dominated theater screens. Disney's marketing campaign was minimal and confused, never clearly explaining what the film was about. The financial disaster of Treasure Planet affected Disney Animation for years afterward. The studio became extremely conservative with budgets and subject matter, afraid to take risks after such a spectacular failure. Clements and Musker wouldn't direct another Disney film until The Princess and the Frog 7 years later. Mars Needs Moms. Mars Needs Moms, released in 2011. This motion capture animated film was produced by Robert Zemeckis' Image Movers Digital and distributed by Disney. The production budget was estimated at $150 million. It earned $11 million worldwide. Let that number sink in. $11 million against a $150 million budget. Mars Needs Moms lost approximately $130 million, making it one of the most catastrophic box office failures in film history. The motion capture animation style created an uncanny valley effect where characters looked disturbingly almost human, but not quite, repelling audiences. Seth Green originally voiced the main character Milo, but was replaced because his adult voice coming from a child character sounded wrong. The replacement voice actor was an actual child, but the damage to the film's production timeline was significant. The title itself became a marketing problem. Mars Needs Moms tested poorly with young boys, the primary demographic for action-adventure films, because they didn't want to see a movie with moms in the title. The plot involved Martians kidnapping Earth mothers to extract their parenting knowledge, a premise that was simultaneously boring and creepy. Critics called the film visually disturbing and emotionally empty. The failure of Mars Needs Moms directly led to Disney shutting down Image Movers Digital and abandoning motion capture animation entirely. Robert Zemeckis returned to live-action filmmaking. The film serves as a cautionary tale about technology overpowering story and the dangers of the uncanny valley in animation. Strange World. Strange World from 2022. This animated sci-fi adventure about a family exploring a bizarre underground ecosystem had a production budget estimated at $180 million. It earned only $73 million worldwide, losing Disney approximately $147 million. The film received decent reviews, holding a 73% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but audiences simply didn't show up. Strange World opened over Thanksgiving weekend 2022 to just $11 million domestically, one of the worst openings ever for a Disney animated film. Disney's marketing campaign was nearly non-existent. Many general audiences were completely unaware the film existed until after it had left theaters. The film featured Disney's first openly gay teenage protagonist, Ethan Clade, whose crush on another boy is explicitly shown. While this representation was praised by critics and LGBTQ advocates, it led to the film being banned in several international markets, including China, Malaysia, and multiple Middle Eastern countries. The lost international revenue contributed significantly to the financial disaster. Disney released Strange World theatrically, despite knowing it would likely fail, as moving it to Disney Plus would have required explaining to shareholders why they wrote off a $180 million production. The film arrived on Disney Plus just 30 days after theatrical release, the shortest window for any Disney animated feature. Strange World represents Disney's struggles in the post-pandemic era, where theatrical animation not named Frozen or Encanto struggled to find audiences. Wish. Wish, released in 2023 as Disney's centennial celebration film. This should have been a triumphant moment marking 100 years of Disney Studios. Instead, it became one of Disney's most disappointing releases in recent memory. The film cost approximately $200 million to produce and earned only $254 million worldwide. While technically not a financial loss, the underwhelming performance for a major anniversary film was considered a massive disappointment. Fans immediately criticized the animation style, which blended computer-generated imagery with a watercolor aesthetic that many found unfinished and cheap-looking. The viral hashtag #ThisIsWhatTheyTookFromYou spread across social media, with fans posting hand-drawn animation from Disney's Renaissance era and comparing it unfavorably to Wish's style. The story borrowed heavily from classic Disney formulas without understanding what made those formulas work. Asha, the protagonist, felt like a generic amalgamation of previous Disney heroines without a distinct personality. The villain, King Magnifico, had sympathetic motivations that the film never properly explored, leaving his turn to evil feeling abrupt and unearned. The songs by Julia Michaels were criticized as forgettable and lacking the melodic complexity of classic Disney music. This Wish, meant to be the film's signature anthem, became a meme for its generic inspirational lyrics. Disney had heavily promoted Wish as a return to their roots and a celebration of their legacy, making its mediocre reception even more painful. The film currently holds a 49% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. For Disney's 100th anniversary, fans expected magic. They got a corporate product that felt focus grouped into blandness. Before we continue, if you're into this, I post videos like this all the time. A subscription would really mean a lot. The Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger from 2013. Disney attempted to recreate the success of their Pirates of the Caribbean franchise by pairing director Gore Verbinski with Johnny Depp in another period action-adventure. The production budget spiraled to at least $215 million, with some estimates reaching $250 million when accounting for reshoots. The film earned just $260 million worldwide. Disney lost between $119 and $190 million, depending on which budget figure is accurate. Production was troubled from the beginning. Disney initially canceled the film in 2011 due to budget concerns, only resuming after Verbinski and Depp agreed to pay cuts. Even with reduced salaries, costs ballooned during production. The film's 2-hour and 29-minute runtime was exhausting, filled with tonal inconsistencies that lurched between violent action and slapstick comedy. Johnny Depp's portrayal of Tonto, a Native American character, sparked immediate controversy. Native American groups criticized the red-face casting and Depp's eccentric interpretation, which many found offensive. Depp claimed Cherokee ancestry to justify the role, but this only intensified criticism. Critics found The Lone Ranger boring despite its massive budget and spectacle. The climactic train sequence, while technically impressive, came too late to save a film that had already lost audience interest. Armie Hammer as the Lone Ranger himself was bland and forgettable, overshadowed completely by Depp's scenery-chewing performance. The failure of The Lone Ranger made Disney extremely cautious about big-budget westerns and effectively killed any plans for sequels or expanded universe films. John Carter. John Carter, released in 2012, stands as one of cinema's most legendary disasters. This adaptation of Edgar Rice Burroughs' A Princess of Mars had a production budget of $263 million. It earned just $284 million worldwide. When accounting for marketing costs estimated at $100 million, Disney lost approximately $200 million. It remains one of the biggest financial failures in film history. The production was cursed from the start. Director Andrew Stanton making his live-action debut after Pixar successes Finding Nemo and Wall-E clashed with studio executives over creative control. Reshoots added tens of millions to the budget. The marketing campaign was incomprehensible. Trailers failed to explain the plot, the setting, or why audiences should care. Disney shortened the title from John Carter of Mars to just John Carter, fearing the word Mars would discourage female audiences after Mars Needs Moms flopped the previous year. This decision removed all context, leaving audiences confused about what the film even was. Test screenings were disastrous, but Disney had invested too much money to cancel release. The film is boring despite its massive scale. Taylor Kitsch as John Carter has the charisma of damp cardboard. The plot is confusing, filled with made-up terminology like Therns and Barsoom that alienate viewers. The film's aesthetic, meant to be epic sci-fi fantasy, looked cheap and weightless, despite the enormous budget. Critics savaged John Carter, and audiences stayed away. The failure led to the resignation of Rich Ross, chairman of Walt Disney Studios. Multiple executives were fired. Disney wrote off the entire $200 million loss in a single quarter. The John Carter disaster influenced Disney's entire corporate strategy going forward, making them extremely conservative with original properties and accelerating their focus on established franchises like Marvel and Star Wars. Tomorrowland, from 2015, director Brad Bird and Disney attempted to create an optimistic sci-fi adventure based loosely on the theme park land. The production budget was $190 million. The film earned just $209 million worldwide, losing Disney approximately $120 to $150 million, depending on marketing costs. George Clooney starred as Frank Walker, a disillusioned inventor, alongside Britt Robertson as Casey Newton, an optimistic teenager. The pairing had zero chemistry, with Clooney appearing bored throughout. The film's biggest problem was its confused message. Tomorrowland wanted to promote optimism and faith in the future while simultaneously depicting a dystopian timeline where humanity's negativity literally destroys the world. The movie preached about hope while showing nearly 2 hours of cynicism and destruction. The plot made little sense. Tomorrowland, a futuristic city in another dimension, somehow broadcasts messages that increase human negativity, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of doom. This concept was explained through lengthy exposition dumps that confused rather than clarified. The film's pacing was terrible, spending too much time on chase sequences and not enough on developing its world or themes. Critics found Tomorrowland preachy and dull. The film had interesting ideas about imagination and innovation, but executed them poorly. Disney hoped to launch a franchise, but canceled all sequel plans immediately after the disappointing opening weekend. Tomorrowland currently holds a 50% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, perfectly split between people who appreciated its ambition and those who found it a boring mess. The Sorcerer's Apprentice. The Sorcerer's Apprentice, released in 2010. This modern-day fantasy starring Nicolas Cage as a sorcerer training a reluctant apprentice had a production budget of $150 million. It earned just $215 million worldwide, losing Disney an estimated $80 to $100 million. Disney intended The Sorcerer's Apprentice to launch a new franchise, evidenced by sequel bait ending and plans for additional films announced before release. The film failed to connect with audiences for multiple reasons. Nicolas Cage's performance as Balthazar Blake was bizarre even by Cage standards, featuring his trademark overacting without the self-awareness that makes his eccentric roles entertaining. Jay Baruchel as the apprentice Dave Stutler was whiny and unlikable, failing to create audience investment in his journey. The film's connection to the famous segment from Fantasia was tenuous at best, limited to a single scene where Dave accidentally brings mops to life. This felt like corporate synergy rather than genuine homage. The special effects, despite the massive massive budget, looked generic and forgettable. Every magical duel resembled every other magical duel, with colored lights and energy blasts that created no sense of danger or excitement. The villain, Maxim Horvath, played by Alfred Molina, had unclear motivations and spent most of the film standing around exposition dumping about ancient magical conflicts. Critics called The Sorcerer's Apprentice loud, dumb, and pointless. The film holds a 41% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Disney immediately abandoned franchise plans and wrote off the financial loss. The failure contributed to Disney's decision to focus on acquiring established franchises like Marvel rather than developing original fantasy properties. A Wrinkle in Time. A Wrinkle in Time, from 2018. Director Ava DuVernay's adaptation of Madeleine L'Engle's beloved science fiction novel had a production budget of $103 million. It earned just $133 million worldwide, losing Disney approximately $86 million after marketing. The film was historic, marking the first time a black woman directed a film with a budget over $100 million. Disney heavily promoted this angle, emphasizing representation and diversity. The casting was praised, featuring Storm Reid, Oprah Winfrey, Reese Witherspoon, and Mindy Kaling. However, good intentions couldn't save a poorly executed film. Critics found A Wrinkle in Time visually garish and narratively incoherent. The book's complex themes about conformity, darkness, and family were simplified into generic, believe-in-yourself messaging. The film looked like a candy-colored fever dream, with costumes and production design so excessive they distracted from the story. Oprah Winfrey, as Mrs. Witch, a giant celestial being, spent scenes literally looking down at other characters both physically and metaphorically. The special effects were inconsistent, with some sequences looking expensive and polished while others appeared unfinished. The villain, IT, represented as a dark cloud with a disembodied voice, had zero menace or personality. Test audiences responded poorly, leading to reshoots that added millions to the budget without improving the film. A Wrinkle in Time currently holds a 42% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 33% audience score. Fans of the novel were disappointed by how the adaptation stripped away the book's intelligence and philosophical depth. The film's failure was particularly painful because it potentially set back opportunities for other female directors of color to receive major studio backing. If you liked what you saw, subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. Thanks for watching.